How you doing today, folks? So today I have for you a review of my original Grail. Now, this is not a super high price Grail. It's very much an obtainable Grail, as I have quite a bit of issues opening this goddamn box. But this is the Large Tighe and Friends Large Tie Fighter. This is the auto variant, which before we get started on that, you can see how this button pops up. A little bit of cutout, so it still gives you a pretty streamlined profile, but you just have tons of ways and options to actuate that just perfectly. Now, most automatics have lock rock. This has nothing. You can kind of see it moving in camera a little bit. That's more me moving this knife, but it's very solid. This is a bigger knife. As you guys know, I have pretty damn big hands, and I can comfortably hold this. It's not the most comfortably thing. I wish it was just a little bit longer, or the swedge is a little less pronounced, because it just naturally gravitates your pinky to go right here, which makes it all a little bit crowded, but it's still very comfortable. This is a 4-inch blade, 154 cm steel. It's an aluminum handle. It has an iron cross pivot, which is not really my thing. Iron cross hardware in general, so that's not really okay. But yeah, no idea if Mr. Large Tighe is associated with the Nazis, but this is a symbol that Adolf Hitler adapted to his regime. So that's something I kind of have a problem with, but it's such a good knife overall that I kind of just overlook it. Now, it has a steel pocket clip, a titanium pocket clip, and then it has this ball bearing in it, which makes it an absolute joy to carry. This has actually been in my collection for quite some time. I have not carried it all that much because I live in California. Automatics are not legal. Also, the fidget factor of an automatic knife to me is just less than what you'll find with a manual. This is a great automatic. Fires reliably every time, locks up perfectly. It's genuinely an absolutely fantastic automatic. It is my favorite automatic I've ever owned. So I mentioned this being my first Grail. When I first started collecting knives, I was immediately drawn to Large Tighe. I just loved the style of his knives, the different kind of organic aesthetics to them, and this is something that was just immediately drawn to me. So I saved up quite a bit of time, and this is the third knife that I ever actually bought, because I went from a pretty cheapo knife to a halfway decent knife to this. And I have used this knife, I have loved this knife, and this knife has been sold. Now, it's been sold not because it's bad. I want to make this abundantly clear. If you happen to like this knife, spoiler alert, it is fantastic. There are a few issues, but they are very minor. And in the words of Nick Shabazz, this is a gem. It is an absolutely fantastic knife. But it's being sold because I have other Grails, and I'm not really a sentimental person at heart, just in general. So while this meant something to me at one point in time, I have pictures of it, I have memories of it, and I don't need the physical piece. So many different pieces come through this channel on a daily basis that it's just kind of taking up space. So without further ado, I'm going to do two different size comparisons. First off, closed. As you can see, it's pretty comparable to the Paramilitary 2. This is a bigger knife, but it's definitely very EDC friendly. I'm going to throw that up next to the Benchmade full-size Reptilian, which again, they're very comparable in size. This is a wonderfully EDC friendly knife. Again, this is an automatic, so if that's not legal where you're at, case in point, I live in California. This is not legal where I'm at. I just carry it anyways because I'm an idiot. Then be aware of that. So the blade is quite a bit longer, so once it all activates, again, you can see the longer blade, slightly longer handle, then becomes a much bigger knife than the PM2. What Large Tighe did with this design is just absolutely incredible, to fit so much blade into this knife. there really isn't any wasted space at all. It is a 4-inch blade, and it is a 4.5-inch handle. So you have a 0.5-inch additional piece, and the majority of that, as you can see, goes right to the end, and it's just how this little lanyard protrudes and pops out, which again is an aesthetic choice. Now again, 154 cm steel, which is an absolute beast of a steel. It's good to go, great edge retention, decent corrosion resistance, and it's easy to sharpen, which again, if you actually use your knives, most people don't really want M390 because, or some type of super steel, because yes, it lasts and holds an edge for very long, but chances are you're going to have an absolute nightmare sharpening it or sending it off to somebody else to get sharpened. Again, I have super steels. I've sharpened super steels. They're not impossible. It's just a headache that I just don't want to have. And, you know, case in point, you know, this knife I've probably had to sharpen maybe twice in like the 4 years that I've had it. I mean, just really think about that. M390 I've had to sharpen as well, and might be like once every 2 years. So what, you have to spend 45 minutes sharpening M390 in order to get that edge that you want to and that nice grind and everything else, and you sharpen it maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 years. That's awesome. You know, that sounds good in theory, but when I sharpen this knife, again, there's no issues with the grind lines because you don't have to do the same thing over and over again. It was absolutely perfect, and it takes me like 5 minutes, and that's it. Obviously, I still do strops and some other stuff, but you know, as far as sharpening goes, it pretty much sharpens itself. 154 cm is an absolutely amazing steel that I feel like does not get the credit it is due. But that's a bit of a ramble, so without further ado, you have this very nice contoured handle. Again, the very organic style from Brian Tighe. This is Brian Tighe and Friends, which is a really stupid name, but to each his own. This is an aluminum handle. It is actually a really nice handle. It doesn't look like it would be the most comfortable thing with all these different little grooves and everything else, but it just fits so nicely. You have this gorgeous, gorgeous blade. I mean, this knife to me, with the exception of the iron cross everywhere, is almost perfect. I love it. Now, I mentioned some problems. So, first problem being, again, the handle is really large, which is good for somebody with my hands. But if you happen to have smaller hands, you might fall on one of these little pivot points, and this sucks. This is a hot spot like you would possibly, excuse me, this is a hot spot like you would not believe. Also, if you happen to have even bigger hands than me, there becomes a point where even if this has to be a pinky grip, this is the most uncomfortable pinky grip you could possibly imagine. So if you have bigger hands than I do, which would mean you'd have 3XL hands, which would mean you're Sasquatch, but they're out there. This is pretty much the worst knife in terms of ergonomics. If you have probably maybe a large size hand, something like that, maybe even a medium, you might fall on these grooves, so that's not good. But that's really kind of about it, honestly. This knife does not really have any true downsides to it. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with how I rate things on my reviews, so one problem will be a deducting of 0.5 points. This is something major, right? If the grind just completely and utterly messed up, or the lockup failed or something like that, that's obviously a pretty big deal. But minor things like this will be 0.5 points. If there are multiple points or multiple things wrong with it, it'll no longer be 0.5 points. Because, you know, one thing we can all overlook. 2 things, a little harder. 3 things, getting much more harder. 5, 6, 7, 8 things, it gets to the point where it's unbearable and it all adds up and we just can't deal with it. So my overall score for this is a 9.5 or a 95. Again, the handle is something that it's a little hard to recommend if you don't just have that perfect size hand. A buddy of mine has extra large hands and this fits him just fine. I don't know anybody with large hands that's tried this before, so that might work for you, it might not. Bigger hands, I would stay away. But it is genuinely an amazing knife. In terms of an automatic, I mean, personally, everybody talks about ProTech, but ProTech to me it feels like it wants to fly out of your hands. You know, this actuates very fast. It's a very hard actuation, but there's no rocking to it. Also, the button is really easily accessible. Most Protecs, in my opinion, they kind of have this weird kind of like a strange texture, like a little bit of a give before it actually actuates, which I guess might be a safety precaution. But for this one, you press it, it goes, that's it, rock solid, no blade rock, no nothing. And again, my overall score is 9.5. It is an absolutely amazing knife. With a blade steel, it's good to go. This gorgeous grind. Again, the Iron Cross, not a fan of, but at the same time, that's an aesthetic choice. Just because I disagree with it doesn't mean somebody else will, so I can't knock them for that. The only real issue is just with this handle, which again isn't really that big of an issue, because if it fits, man, it fits perfectly. This thing is an absolute glove to me. So with all that being said, I love you all very, very much. Thank you so much for your time. Just know that I appreciate you. I appreciate your likes, your comments, your subscriptions, you know, your messages, everything. You guys are my absolute heart. This is being sold and going out to a wonderful person who approached me, who was a watcher of these videos. I don't know if he subscribes or not. I like to hope so. If not, brother, please subscribe. Definitely do appreciate you, and more content will definitely be on its way shortly. Again, I love you all, and please do me just this one favor and be kind to one another. There's too much drama in the world, so just do the best you can to be a better person tomorrow than you were today, and I do promise you, you will find your happily ever after and your center in life. As always, take care, and bye.